Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, I suppose, depending on where you are. Welcome to our Eclipse Cloud DevTools Working Group Community Update. This will be our second quarter update. We'll have another update, a third quarter update in September, and our fourth quarter update will be at EclipseCon in Ludwigsburg. Just a quick restatement here of our vision. To define and build an ecosystem of best-in-class open source web and cloud-based development tools, and to promote and drive the broad adoption of these two. And really, it's both of those, probably equally weighted. Our agenda, I'm going to hit some Q1 and Q2 news highlights, and then the meat of this presentation will be project updates, and then SIG updates, one SIG and one emerging SIG, and then we'll leave room for Q&A at the end. So yeah, we had quite a bit going on in the first half. You can see a bunch of releases here. I'm not going to go into any more detail on the releases. We'll, folks talking about those projects, we'll talk about those in one form or another. But you can see more than 1,600 commits as of, I think, earlier Monday of this week. OpenVSX registry, we've got over 1,900 extensions, over 900 publishers, and I'll show you trends here in a moment. Cloud IDE Day, this is our second one, actually Cloud IDE Days. You can see 291 registrants, 151 attendees, 12 sessions. The link there, and we'll make this presentation available, link there to the YouTube playlist. Big news, we're in person again, finally, at EclipseCon 2022, October of this year. Call for papers open and closed. Registration will open shortly. And hey, if everybody could mute, if everybody could mute, we're getting a little bit of background noise. Stay tuned for TheiaCon 2022. We plan another TheiaCon in November. And Cloud Tool Time is back. You can see a playlist of the older sessions, and there's a link there if you have a good topic you'd like to present. Let's advance. Why are we not advancing? There we go. Oops. Oh, I lost my. Oh well, I'll dig those up later. When I published this, I had some. It looks like they didn't make this version of the presentation. I have some graphs that show trends of published extensions and publishers at openvsx.org, and those are.
They're on the next slide.
What's that?
They're on the next slide, I think.
After did I drop them in after this? Let me just go through this. I must put them in there. Oh, there they go. Sorry. Thank you. So yeah, there you can see downloads. You can see a pretty steady trend, downloads by month, and then you can see publishers and published extensions by month. Again, pretty steady trends. And that starting point in November is when the Eclipse Foundation took over this property and all the really good work done by Typefox and others. Okay, so yeah, let me back up here and go through. Yeah, so we'll have Jonas talk first about Theia, then Philip talking about EMF Cloud, CDD Cloud, and GLSP. Art talk about OpenVSX and the registry. Ilya talk about Eclipse Che. Jordan talk about Dirigible. Santan and Rohan talk about JCube. And then Miro talk about Sprotty. Rob will talk about the embedded SIG. And we have an emerging SIG that we're talking about. It hasn't started yet, and we'll have Melanie talk about that. Okay. Skip over these. And so let's go to the project update. So we'll have, let's go, Jonas, you are up.
Thank you for the introduction. Before I talk about Theia, just a quick note. Philip and me, we have to leave in 25 minutes, so we have to drop the call after our update. That's not because we're not interested, but we have another company event today.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, now about Theia and Theia Blueprint. So a lot has happened over the last half years. The project is very active. I would like to highlight 3 features out of many that are new, but maybe 3 very important one. The first one is a toolbar. Yay! many people demanded for toolbars in many web-based tools. I'm not telling any names. Theia has one now. It's not only a standard toolbar, as you can see in the video to the right. It's a toolbar that the user can fully configure. Very flexible, very cool implementation. Thanks for Ericsson to Ericsson for contributing this. Another thing that I personally really like is the native playwright support. So we have a page object model for writing playwright test, which enables you to really very efficiently test Theia-based application end-to-end, and very important for adopters of the framework. Another big leap is currently on the way and will be published with the next release is a performance improvement of the file API, especially important when dealing with big files. And we just improved the performance by almost factor 10 there. So that's one order of magnitude. So you can really feel the difference. And there are many more new features. That brings me to the next update. We have regular release blocks since the beginning of this year. We thought it would be very useful for the community. So every month there is a blog post highlighting the news and noteworthy features and other news around Theia. So you can follow Theia on Twitter or subscribe to the Planet to get notifications about these blogs. We have received a lot of contributions to the documentation recently. So the documentation on the website is not the same that you might be used to. So most standard contribution points are very well documented now. The source code, the API documentation has improved a lot. And you can see on the right side, according to OpenHub, an analysis tool, we have now a very well documented source code base, which is exceptional. We will introduce a new type of release called community release this year for the first time. Theia follows a monthly release schedule, but we want to make every third release, so once per quarter, a community release, which where we spend some more effort on stability and also compatibility with other tools. So that is interesting news for adopters that are not in their super active development phase anymore, but still want to benefit from new versions of Theia. And you might have seen there were a couple of blog posts about Theia really reaching a state now of maturity and feature richness and so on that we consider it to be the next generation of the Eclipse platform. So if you want to implement a tool or IDE or even RCP-like application, and you're currently still on the desktop, then Theia is a very, very interesting choice. And it's really, we see a lot of interest in new adopters at the moment at Theia. So the project is really gaining speed and gaining momentum. What's upcoming? One feature similar to toolbar that is requested a lot in the area of tools is detachable windows. Has been standard on the desktop, not available on the web yet, but we are about to release the first version of this feature. And also a lot requested from different adopters is we will start to introduce semantic versioning for our core API, which again makes it easier to maintain an adopting project on Theia long-term in combination with a community release cycle. For all the details, join our website and watch for blogs around these topics. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jonas. Philip, you are up next.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. So first up, about EMF Cloud, just in case you don't know it. So EMF Cloud is an umbrella project for components and technologies of all sorts in order to make the Eclipse modeling framework and all its benefits and features it offers available for cloud-based tools. So it's not one single project, but in fact, many projects. And therefore, it's hard to pick the news to give updates about. So I picked just the biggest ones. So first up, the model server, which is the component that can manage an EMF model's runtime state and share it across multiple services like diagrams, forms, textual editors, and so on. So this component now has a new version of the REST endpoint that it provides for its client. The main benefit of this new endpoint is that it removes any leakages of EMF jargon, basically to make it even easier for non-EMF understanding clients like TypeScript clients and so on to interact with it. So it feels now very, very native and very native to the web clients that may talk to the model server. So this is really big. And this is also related to the next item, which is a completely new component that is called Model Server Node. Essentially, it's a node-based model server that can be that allows you to write the modeling business logic, if you will, like custom commands, validation rules, and stuff like that, in TypeScript in a node-based environment. And still by that allow you to talk to an EMF model server even further in the back, so you can still keep your EMF models as they are, but implement a lot of the business logic based on TypeScript, which of course leads to a much more homogeneous development environment. Also, there is a couple of more components like the Theia tree editor, the Theia property view based on JSON forms and stuff like that, which all live in the EMF Cloud project, which received a ton of improvements and updates, for instance, regarding Theia versions and so on, which I'm not going into too much detail, but still there is a lot of new things to check out. One thing that I'm very happy to observe in the last quarter, but even more so before, that the community is getting really, really active. So we are really happy to see a lot of active discussions in the discussions forums, and even the community helping each other. So it's really welcoming and very inspiring atmosphere there. And we observed that many new adopters and contributors use and add and enhance the EMF Cloud components. Right. Please, if you can switch to the next slide. Let's move to CDT Cloud. So just in case you don't know CDT Cloud, basically CDT Cloud is somehow similar in terms of goals to EMF Cloud, but of course for C++ development tools. So basically it's a collection of different technologies and components and best practices to help you build customizable cloud-based C and C++ IDEs and tools. In the last couple of months, we received several new, completely new components and a lot of updates on existing components. I just, again, cherry-picked a few of them. So for instance, CDT GDB debug adapter is available now and received a lot of additions and enhancements. One example, for instance, is the non-stop mode and so on, but there is many more to check out. Then there is the CDT Amalgamator project. I'm always struggling pronouncing it. So basically, this is helpful for debugging multiple processes and C programs. Then there is also a lot of updates in the Trace Compass Cloud, which is a Theia and VS Code compatible version of Trace Compass, basically based again on a protocol talking to a Trace backend and showing you all. You can see that basically here on the right-hand side in the animated GIF. If you wait for it, right now it's not visible, but there is a showcase there where you also see traces basically shown in a nice UI. Just as you are used to it from Trace Compass. And last but not least, there is also a component called ClangD Contexts, which is now available in CDT Cloud for download and also on NPM to allow you to switch between multiple contexts in a collection of C projects so that ClangD is configured according to the selected context. These and also many more of these technologies inside of CDT Cloud are then collected into CDT Cloud Blueprint, which also received a lot of updates, which I would like to point out. So CDT Cloud Blueprint is essentially, on the one hand side, a blueprint that is like a starting point for you to build your custom C++ tool. But on the other side, it's also a vehicle for you to easily try out the components of CDT Cloud and check out what's new about them and so on. So very recently, we added to CDT Cloud Blueprint the builds and downloads. So you can very soon really download the CDT Cloud Blueprint without having to build it locally and just try it out. And in order to guide new users and adopters to what to look out for in this tool, there is a new welcome page that suggests a few things that you can try out and even lets you automatically generate example projects and, for instance, traces into your workspace that you can then open and try out all the great components that CDT Cloud has to offer. Right. Please, John, if you could switch to the last slide of my part, not the last of this presentation, of course. So last but not least, GLSP, the graphical language server platform. In case you don't know it, it's basically a client-server framework that allows you for building next-generation modern diagram editors. So we are very happy that the 1.0 release has been approved by the Eclipse Foundation, and with that, GLSP left the incubation phase. Of course, there is mostly things that come along with that, which is stabilized APIs. There is a lot of extensive documentation that has been provided by the community, and that really helps you getting started. There is also one entirely new component, which is the node-based GLSP server framework. So basically, you could always build GLSP servers in a technology that you like or in a programming language. But of course, you had to build it from scratch if there weren't a framework for that particular language. And so far, GLSP has offered only a framework for Java. But now there is also a framework for Node. So basically, that allows you to use the same technology stack on the client and the server. And that, of course, helps a lot, especially if you're in the context, for instance, of Theia or VS Code, where you already have a Node runtime environment, but maybe not have a Java runtime environment available on the clients. So that's great. Also really helpful for getting started. There is now project templates that new adopters can use to get started with their projects. And since GLSP is really focused on flexibility, you can basically choose in which project template best fits your needs. So either you first choose the tool platform like Theia or VS Code, then you choose which modeling backend you would like EMF, EMF Cloud, JSON, whatever you prefer. And then you choose essentially the Java or Node-based server framework that you want to build on. And then you get a very, very simple setup to get you started for your project. Besides that, there is, of course, several new features and fixes, but I'm not going into too much detail. Also, last but not least, we received a lot of contributions, which is really great, and I'm really thankful and excited about that we get more and more contributions and adopters from all different branches and areas, and that's really great to see. As you can also see in the graph here on top, we're very happy to see increasing adoption. Right. With that, thank you very much. Back to you, Tom.
Very good. Yeah, thank you, Philip. Oops, Art is next.
Hey.
There you go. Hey,
thanks, Jan.
Yep.
I'm Art. I work on the OpenVSX project on behalf of Gitpod. OpenVSX is a vendor-neutral marketplace for VS Code-based editor extensions. The current OpenVSX release adds support for pre-releases, startup platform-specific extension versions, and a new endpoint for VS Code's resource URL template. These features ensure that OpenVSX stays up to date with VS Code and VS Codium. There were some issues with migrating the file resources for the resource URL template functionality. This issue has now been fixed and it's awaiting deployment to openvsx.org. You can track the process on the release through Help Desk issue 1483. Then the next release, it will most likely include added upstream support for VS Code endpoints, and also the ability to rewrite all upstream links to local links, so that the local OpenVSX instance acts as a proxy. This is particularly useful for corporate networks with a firewall that allows traffic to the local OpenVSX instance, but blocks direct access to the upstream OpenVSX instance. Another feature for the next release is the ability to publish an extension version through the web UI. The image on the right shows you what it will look like. And there's a big purple publish button that makes it really quick to navigate to the extension section. Then from the extension section, you click publish extension button and you drop your VSIX package. Once you hit the publish button, then the extension version is uploaded and processed by the server. Sometimes it can happen that the namespace doesn't exist yet. Then the web UI creates a namespace for you and retries the publishing process so that the user doesn't have to do that manually. Then finally, the next release will also address the query endpoint's bandwidth usage. The current endpoint returns a map of all versions for each extension version. And then, yeah, for an extension with around 500 versions, such as Microsoft's BAT extension, this would result in a response of 30 MBs if the include all versions request parameter was set to true. That's because the response would be 500 extension versions, and then each extension version contains an all versions map of, again, 500 version links. So in total, you have a response with 250,000 links Yeah, after changing that response structure, it has been reduced to 800 kbs. So that's almost 40 times reduction in bandwidth usage. Now some features for an upcoming release. First, we have the ability for an admin to change an extension's namespace. This could be for renaming a namespace or merging two namespaces. There are options to keep the old namespace or to abort the process if the new namespace already exists. Yeah, this feature still has to be tested in terms of user experience. Then the second feature fixes vulnerabilities by updating Spring Boot to version 2.7.0. Older versions of Spring Boot contains vulnerabilities in its Spring Web MVC and Log4j dependencies. Additionally, the Spring Fox API documentation dependency is replaced by Spring Doc because Spring Fox is incompatible with the new Spring Boot version and no new version has been released in the last 2 years. An added benefit to that is that API documentation will be in the OpenAPI 3 format from then on. In terms of community, we have had more pull requests and also more issue contributors. Philippe and Jean-Pierre and also Anton from Gitpod regularly file issues and review pull requests. The additional upstream support was in collaboration with Florent Benoit. The query endpoint performance improvements were in collaboration with GitHub user C. Korn. It's also great to receive cybersecurity expertise of GitHub user Amtadev, who filed 3 vulnerability issues. And we also received a new pull request to support Amazon S3 storage from Marshall Walker. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Art. It's good to see those PRs coming in like that. Okay, over to Ilya and Eclipse Che.
Hello, folks. So happy to provide an update for Eclipse Che noteworthy features. So for those who are new, Eclipse Che is the open source project that provides the possibility to run Kubernetes native IDEs for developer teams on Kubernetes infrastructure. And about the noteworthy features, so the switch to dev workspace operator as workspace engine is the first one. So previously we use Che server for creating the workspaces, and this was basically a Java application, and we use Kubernetes client Java library for creating of the Kubernetes resources. Now we use dev workspace operator for that. So it's native Kubernetes API, and it boils down to operator lifecycle management. So it's very kube native. You can see the diagram on top, which describes the flow, the new flow. Other than that, we have the pair programming feature in place. So it is achieved by the Code Together, a third-party VS Code extension that is also available on the Open VS6 registry. Apart from that, we decommissioned the kick lock, which provides the user identification for our project. So now we use native OpenShift or Kubernetes authentication. So important note that for Kubernetes, vanilla Kubernetes doesn't provide that. So for Minikube, we use DAX. For other Kubernetes infrastructure, it's up to admin to set up the user identification for Eclipse Che. And the last but not least, there are some UX and admin improvements. For example, we have a possibility to configure the notification header using the Eclipse Che custom resource. And there is a better UX in general for generating the default URL prefix for your Eclipse Che instance. Next slide, please. About the community updates, so we have a brand new site. So you can take a look at that on the eclipse.org/che. We launched the Eclipse Che blog website also, and we had 3 blog posts for 2022. It's about contributing for the first time to a project, reviewing pull requests, and pair programming using VS Code. It's about the Code Together VS Code extension. A lot more is coming, so stay tuned. we should have more blog posts in the coming months. Other than that, we have the Cloud IDE Days session about running your favorite IDE on Kubernetes with Eclipse Chat. So really encourage you to take a look at that. If you're interested in the project, we described in details about the new workspace engine and a lot more, like how you can run your IDE using kubectl apply command. And last but not least, also we have a newsletter about Eclipse Chat getting the new dev environment engine. Also, a lot of details of how the new dev workspace engine works under the hood. Next slide, please. And what's next? So for upcoming features, we have an epic about Git zero config with OS flow for major providers like GitLab, Bitbucket. Better getting started experience. So you might know that Eclipse Chat is now a very dev file centric project, and dev file is basically a sandbox project on CNCF. And we want to have this to be an internal detail for those who just getting started, so that they would not have a lot of clue about the dev files, and everything would just work out of the box for projects that doesn't leverage the dev file flow. Next is built-in container images. Another epic that we want to have this straightforward way for built-in containers images from your workspaces. And the last thing is addressing the technical debt. So we are going to archive obsolete repositories that we have quite a few now after the migration from Chess server engine to their workspace engine. And we also plan to decommission the PostgreSQL database. This is internal operand that that is still used. So we decommissioned the key clock. We use native OpenShift or Kubernetes user authentication. So we want to get rid of the PostgreSQL completely, and instead use Kubernetes resources like config map secrets all over the shop for the project. That's about it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ilya. Okay, Jordan, we are up to you with Dirigible.
Thank you, John. So about the news and updates in the last quarter, we mainly focused on the new look and feel, as you can see on the right-hand side. Actually, this is a preview of the workbench perspective, and we're in a process to address and redesign in a bit and migrate also to other perspectives. So this is totally based on fundamental styles, which is an open source project coming from SAP. It is using also the SAP Fiori guidelines, icons, and styles as well. Previously, we were using Font Awesome and Bootstrap, and with the new look and feel, I can say that it's getting even more enterprise ready. And maybe the next important update is about the JavaScript engine and the support of ECMAScript modules. And even going further, the next step would be to enable also TypeScript in Dirigible. So maybe we'll be ready for the next, maybe for Q3 update, hopefully with that. Another big improvement is with this mono repo. So as in the chat presentation, sorry, that Ilya, sorry. So as Ilya mentioned, we're also in a process for archiving some repositories. So right now, you could simply open Dirigible, then go to the Git perspective and clone the Dirigible repo itself, and it is possible to add new modules and update existing one. So it is essentially building Dirigible with Dirigible. So we are even one step closer to the in-system experience that we want, and we're the first, eating our own dog food in that process. And through that, we made some various improvements for the Git in order to allow that experience. And the next major improvement that we're expecting is actually with the debugger. So we have quite some work there to make it also enterprise ready, and we're expecting the release of Eclipse Dirigible 7.0, which will include all of that features, and it will be huge leap forward from 6.0. And maybe from the community point of view, there's one important update with Project XSK. I'm not sure whether it was mentioned already or not, but I'll mention it. So Project XSK is again in the SAP GitHub organization. It's an open source project. It is providing support for migrating certain SAP applications from, let's say, one legacy platform to a new open source based one. And this XSK is actually based on Eclipse Dirigible. So we have some adoption there as well, and we have some, let's say, boost in the community and pull request issues, etc., through that project. So this is really important for us.
Okay, is that it? Is that, are you finished then?
Yeah, that's
okay, Jordan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Sun. I think you're talking and Rohan is not on JCube.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. So maybe some of you don't know about JCube, so I wanted to start with a few words. So JCube is a set of plugins for Maven and now Grader that we analyze your Java projects and provides Maven goals and now Grader tasks to build your Docker container images, generates Kubernetes manifests, and deploy everything to Kubernetes. It will provide default configuration based on your project, and these are also easily customizable with a minimum of YAML file editing, because we hate YAML. So new features that we have in JCube. So first of all, we graduated the Grader plugins features starting from 1.8. We are now also supporting the M1 architecture, and then there is minor improvements like fragment resources from multiple environments, or the compatibility with Jakarta EE and Tomcat 10 for web projects, Java 17 supports, and some improvements in when you package application with Helm. Next slide, please. Yeah, so a few things for the community updates. So we've been featured by Grader, so this is very good for us for the promotion. First of all, in the newsletter, February, Grader newsletter, but also in LinkedIn. They mention us in one of their posts. So we are very happy with that, of course. We also have started the Google Summer of Code. We have 3 students that are going to work this summer on JCube, and we are continuing giving talks and writing some blog posts. So I gave one talk at Java 2 Days about how to move your Java application to Kubernetes, and also Mark did a workshop at the Valencia Jug. And I hope we will have more in-person events and opportunities to talk about JCube. And that's pretty it for us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sun. I think our last project update before we get to the SIGs will be Sprotty and Miro.
Yeah, thanks, John. So Sprotty is a diagramming framework for web environments. So it's a basis for GLSP and other Eclipse projects, but is also usable as standalone for rendering diagrams from any sources, be it directly in the front end or for any back-end component. One thing here is that we would like to graduate into a 1.0 release. Although there's no target date, so this is currently an idea, and so the main thing I'd like to see here is a review of the APIs so that we can guarantee a stable API after this release. And so, yeah, I would like to target this in the second half of this year, but kind of promise that we're going to make it. Otherwise, the main efforts on this project have been around integration. And the most exciting thing from my perspective is the Sprotty protocol package, which is a Node.js compatible package, but so that is used both in Node.js backends and also in the front end. So it gives a common code base for front end and back end so that we can rely on the same interface definitions and a set of tools that are independent of the actual execution runtime. And this enables to implement diagram sources. So any sources that generates a diagram model from somewhere within a Node.js environments, like a web servers that are running in Node.js. And so typically you would connect from the front end to that web server via WebSocket so that they can communicate with each other and the server can send spontaneous updates to the front end. Also in Theia extensions. So Theia already has a Node.js backend and can communicate with its front end via JSON RPC, which is wrapped into a proxy mechanism. And so you can run a data source or diagram source in a Theia extension backend and send that result to the front end. Also in VS Code extensions, which typically also run in Node.js, unless it's a web extension. And VS Code has a concept of web views that can contain any kind of content. And so there's also an integration of Sprotty for VS Code web views. And so if you have a data source in a VS Code extension, then you can use this package to show the result in a diagram in a web view using the web view message passing offered by VS Code. And finally, also in language servers. So the language server protocol is typically used to connect language support for well-known programming languages. But you can also define your own languages, so domain-specific languages, or create support for any existing language. In the past, we've been doing that a lot using Xtext. That's an older Java-based project. But last year, we created a new project based on TypeScript. It's called Langium. So it's very similar to Xtext, but fully based on TypeScript. And that can run in Node.js. And so you can also create a data source for Sprotty within such a Langium-based language server. And by that, create a diagram from any text source that you create. And that's also shown in the screenshot here in the upper right. So in the middle, there's a text editor with a domain-specific language, in this case, a state machine. And on the right side, then we see the diagram representation of this state machine that is fully synchronized with the text. So any change in the text is reflected in the diagram. And yeah, finally, we have a new logo. So this was created a few months ago. And maybe one thing that is not mentioned on the slide, which might also be interesting, we have a new integration of the ELK layout engine. So that's another Eclipse project that provides high quality layout algorithms in Java. And so in the past, we've been using a transpilation to JavaScript using a very old GWT compiler that works, but can be rather slow for larger models. And so now we have a new integration that uses the ELK library in a Java process in the background, and that handles all the communication to that process and translates all the information via JSON. And so that's an alternative way to integrate automatic layout. And like in the example we see here for the state machine, that layout of that diagram is also computed automatically by the ELK library. And that's it. Thanks.
Very good. Yeah, thanks, Miro. Okay, on to updates for our one SIG and one emerging SIG. We'll have Rob first talk about the embedded SIG. Rob?
All right, thanks, John. So I think this might be the first update for the special interest group around embedded development. It's certainly the first I've run, so perhaps a little bit of background around what we're all about. So we've been running since April 2021, so coming up to, well over a year now since this has been running. We meet every month. We have a core group of sort of interested parties from different companies in sort of like the embedded ecosystem. And what we do is we talk about all of the interesting things which are going on regards to Eclipse projects, what's going on in the general ecosystem. And we try and find projects which we can all benefit from and actually develop together in order to make sort of like or build the groundwork of a lot of sort of the embedded development tools together. So we've got core representation from ARM, Eclipse Source, Ericsson, Renesas, and ST, and we have often we have every one of these companies represented on our monthly calls. We've had a few other interested parties from other companies I probably can't mention on here, who have come along for a couple of calls and are interested in potentially joining in and seeing what we're up to. And as I say, our sort of like main focus is to discuss trends around Theia, the Theia framework and Visual Studio Code as well, and sort of looking at what plugins are out there, what things we can create, and what things we can do to enhance some of these projects. So CDT Cloud is one of those as well. So if you go to the next slide, I can outline some of the things we've done over the last year or so. So we have some wins here. Now, a lot of these projects have already been mentioned, a lot of this functionality, but what our SIG helps to do is sort of like focus some drive behind some of these projects, or encourage some of the member companies to actually upstream some of these or move these into different projects. So I think most of these areas of functionality have already been mentioned in other projects, but this is really where they sort of originated from, or where we sort of like push these things from, I suppose. So the multiple window support in Eclipse Theia, a lot of that was driven by the need for debugging specifically. There's a lot of interest from embedded vendors to actually be able to split out lots of windows. So there was a lot of information gathered within our group as to where we should focus efforts first, and how that can manifest. The Clang-D context functionality mentioned in CDT Cloud, and it's also exposed in Eclipse Theia as well, came out of our group. That was a need to be able to split out the different sort of debugging contexts when you're actually looking at different projects within these products. Quite a mouthful, this one, debugging heterogeneous systems. So looking at multiple debug sessions you're running at the same time, which is actually the project's called CDT Amalgamator, which is now under the CDT Cloud umbrella project, which is the ability to bring together multiple VS Code debug sessions and actually run them in parallel. That was devised and worked on within the SIG. CDT GDB adapter did exist before the SIG did. It's actually worked on externally, but again, this is something that we're all interested in, and a lot of the companies actually use. So we come together and talk about functionality and enhancements here, and that's living also in CDT Cloud, as is Trace Compass, which is a sort of like a generic tracing library, which is being used to look at different eventing in certain systems around embedded development. And the CDT Cloud Blueprint, which starts to bring together a lot of these sort of areas of functionality into one downloadable or example sort of application. So this is almost an output of SIG, I suppose, as a whole, but it's more of a sort of an example of how people could take these different components and bring them together. And one thing of note, I think there was also some functionality around getting a standalone SVD viewer. So SVD files are the things which describe external peripherals on an embedded device. There was some good discussions around this, and that has actually led to a project which exists in the open source community around SVD viewing. So our current initiatives are focused on looking at deploying binaries across cloud-connected devices. This is something that Eclipse Source are primarily working on. It's something that's very sort of interesting to the group, as this is the idea that we can effectively deploy a binary to a device that's not local to you. You can actually send it across the internet somewhere else. This is something that's in flight at the moment. And also we are tracking the landscape of extensions around embedded development within VS Code and Theia, which includes things like sort of like VS Code core support for things like opening hex editors, core support for accessing devices through web, which is something which has dropped into VS Code master. It should be in the next release, which is interesting. And things like the debug extensions, which are being developed by various different companies for VS Code, which would be of interest to our SIG as well, to ensure that we are aligned with these things, as well as making sure that we're not redeveloping a lot of them. So we want to work well in this ecosystem. That's all I have, John, but happy to take questions later.
Very good. Yeah, thanks, Rob. Now on to Melanie and emerging SIG around modeling.
Thanks, John. So hi all. I will try to explain why we're proposing a modeling special interest group. For many years, the efforts of the Eclipse modeling community has enabled emergence of hundreds of desktop modeling tools, both commercial and open source. And as there is a shift from desktop-based tools to web-based tools, major barriers to adoption are lowered. So this presents a need for a new generation of modeling tools. And we see a high potential here in such web-based tools, but we see also how much effort still remains before reaching the wide range of features existing in current desktop-based tools. And so since the beginning, we believe at Hobbyus that building and sharing open source software is the most efficient way to build persistent and high quality technologies. And that is why we're working on creating this modeling SIG within the Eclipse Cloud DevTools working group in order to collaborate with partners sharing this goal. So our first purpose within this modeling SIG is to create a space for the modeling community to exchange around web-based tools. And the first step will be to discuss with the modeling community actors about the future of modeling, sharing and aggregating roadmaps, communicating over a common roadmap would be great. We aim to ease contributions and involvements also around web modeling projects, and also to ease integration by, for instance, providing a set of common integrated components, by trying to align technological dependencies of frameworks, aligning practices to version or distribute components. So finally, our goal is to show also and promote a modern modeling stack and web modeling technologies coming with it. And I will demonstrate in the next slide which kind of technologies we would expect. Could you go to the next slide? Thanks. So the idea is that Hobbyus joins the Cloud DevTools working group, taking SiriusWeb with him. And SiriusWeb is a good example of these new web modeling technologies we would like to see being part of the modeling special interest group. And just for the one who do not know SiriusWeb, it is an open source project hosted by the Eclipse Foundation. Its purpose is to make your engineers more efficient thanks to domain-specific graphical tools. And SiriusWeb has kept the spirit of the well-established technology Eclipse series to ease the creation of domain-specific studio, but no for the cloud stack. So it is a very active open source project with a new release each 8 weeks. It is based on a classical web stack like Spring, React, and JavaScript. And it provides a ready-to-use application or reusable components to integrate in an existing application or in Cloud IDE like VS Code or Theia. Could you go to the next slide? Thanks. So if you are interested by joining this modeling special interest group, or if you want to discuss about it, you can contact me. We have started the discussion with other partners to create this special interest group. There is still seats to take and many possibilities. So really do not hesitate to join us and share your expectations and thoughts. And so that's it for me.
Okay, thank you, Melanie. So now we've got about 5 or 10 minutes left here for Q&A. We don't have that many people on the call, so you can either go into Slack or you can go off mute and pose a question. I'll pause here. I have one question, but I'll wait and see if anybody else has one. No? Okay, well, my question is for Art and OpenVSX and the registry. Art, your the enhancement that you talked today about, the proxy support. I've talked to a couple adopters, a corporate account that are adopters of the registry, and they need the ability to run an internal registry to both curate a set of plugins for their internal developers, as well as run it in an air-gapped configuration where it maybe sits in a place where it can talk to the internet, but they have other engineering shops that are not allowed an internet connection, and they will then connect to a registry inside the company's firewall. Is that the enhancements you were talking about today? Do those is that in that general area? Do those begin to address those requirements, or is it something different than that?
Yeah, those improvements do address that issue.
Okay.
So normally the response contains links to extension versions, and those links wouldn't be modified. So now they get modified to point back to the local instance, and then it goes again through like the upstream, and gets the version from the upstream instance. So yeah, that would address it.
Okay, oh, excellent, thank you. Anybody else? No? Okay. Well, listen, I appreciate everybody's help in pulling the materials together and coordinating and joining the call here to present an update. I will wrap up this recording here shortly and post both the slide deck and this recording to the Cloud DevTools public mailing list. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks all.